What's up everybody, welcome to Best Massage Tech, where today I'm taking a look at the hip hook. If you have pain in your back, hip, tailbone, pelvis, knee, or toe, a tight iliacus could be at the core of this pain. Now that being said, you might be asking yourself, what the heck is my iliacus? Well, your iliacus is a muscle that goes from your spine to the front of your hip. And it, along with your psoas, plays a primary role in lifting and moving your leg. And so this tightness can develop through a multitude of different things in your everyday life, whether that be from sitting for a long time at your desk or sitting during a long drive. It could come from running. It could come from a lot of lunging motion. So whether you're playing tennis, soccer, volleyball, baseball, or basketball, it could come from cycling. It can come from a repetitive kicking motion, whether that's martial arts or kickboxing or soccer. If you're doing a lot of heavy lifting and squatting, or even just movements that cause your hips to open up a lot, whether that's yoga or gymnastics or dance. And so for me, this is something that I experienced a lot when I was in college and I was running track and field, and I was a hurdler. And so I had a lot of movement with my hips that required a driving force, that initial drive of my leg up to kick out over a hurdle. And so I started to develop a lot of lower back pain and learned that this was coming from a tight iliacus. Now this is something that I would get treated by a massage therapist almost weekly, and it was fantastic and it did a great job of releasing that tension. But the problem is that I always needed that massage therapist to do that. And that's something that's very common with your iliacus and your psoas, that they're very hard muscles to target on your own. And so that's where the hip hook comes into play, which is a tool that was designed by Christine Koth, a physical therapist. And she designed this tool to apply prolonged, precise, angular pressure specifically on your psoas and your iliacus to release some of that tension and free up your core. And this was a tool that I had never really heard of until I came across it on an Instagram ad. I'd heard of the pso-rite, which I know is a tool designed specifically to target your psoas, but I hadn't heard of this. And so I started to do some research, and I quickly found out that they've sold over 35,000 of these, and I immediately knew this was something that I had to try out and get my hands on. So in this video, I will start by talking about what comes with the hip hook out of the box. I'll talk about a little bit how it works and how to use it, and then I will go ahead and show a few different methods on how to use the tool itself. So out of the box, the hip hook does only come with two things. It comes with the hip hook itself, and it comes with a little fabric drawstring pouch, which just says "Open hips, have more fun." And this is designed to be a carry case, and while it's nice that they include it, it's not really necessary because the hip hook is small enough and easy enough to just carry around on its own. It does also include an instruction manual, which has a 6-step guide on how to actually use the hip hook. Now they do make note that this whole device is latex free. Most of this is made out of plastic, but you will see the base of it is made out of metal. And then the very bottom of it, you see you've got some hip hook branding on it. This is sort of a rubber non-slip surface, just designed to make sure it stays still while you are using it. Now you do have another little bit of hip hook branding attached to the base. And then the tip of this here, the kind of top part of the hook, has a plastic or a rubber coating on it, just designed for some non-slip as well. The rest of this is just sort of a smooth plastic. So the primary focus of this is this tip of it, or the hook. This is designed to target on your psoas. Then once you have your psoas released, this actually has some flexibility on it, and you can go ahead and rock into your iliacus and relieve that tension as well. Now before I go ahead and show how to actually use this, an important question to answer before you consider buying this is, do I actually have a tight iliacus? Is this something that's even gonna help me? And to that I'll say, you're gonna get relief from this regardless, because most likely your iliacus has probably never been touched or treated. And so just even getting any sort of relief on that, you're gonna notice some sort of release of tension in your core from that. But it's primarily designed for people that do have specifically tight and overly tight iliacus muscles. So there's a video that I watched by Christine Koth, again, the founder of this device, that just talks about 5 signs that you might have a tight iliacus. So I'm just gonna walk through 5 of those signs here and just talk about some obvious signs that might be an indicator that you have a tight iliacus. And these little tests are helpful because Again, remember, this is typically something that's going to be worked on by a professional, whether that's a massage therapist, an athletic trainer, or a physical therapist. And what they're typically going to do is a test called the supine to sit test. So they're gonna have you lay down, they're gonna look at your ankle bones and see how even they are. Then they'll have you sit up and they'll look to see if there's an imbalance in your ankles once you've sat up. If you see one get shorter, that typically is a sign of a tight iliacus. But if you don't have a professional that's gonna be working on you, it's nice to have a couple visual cues that you can look at yourself just to know if, hey, maybe I do have a tight iliacus and this tool could help me. So the first thing to look at is just your standing posture, and there's a few different visual cues that you can look at to see if maybe you do have that tight iliacus. And so if you notice any of these things, it could be a sign of a tight iliacus. The first would be that your leg is rotated inward. The second would be that your knee is pointed inward. If your knee is hyperextended, if you have a flat arch in your foot, or if your big toe is turned outward. All of these could be signs. I'll lay a picture over here just so you guys can see. This is from Christine's book, just to show some indications of what exactly I mean by some of these. The second would be just to lay on your back and touch your iliacus. Now your iliacus is kind of located just inside of your hip bones. If you're just touching in that area and it's really painful and uncomfortable, likely a sign that it's a tight iliacus. The next thing to look at while you're laying down is just to look at your feet. And if one of your feet specifically is rotating outward more so than the other, that leg likely has a tight iliacus because it's pulling tight at your hip, which causes the rest of your leg to rotate outwards just naturally. The next one would be to lay on your back and just bring your knee to your chest. If you get a pinching feeling up in your hip, this is likely caused by a tight iliacus. And then the very last one is to bring both of your hips up. I kind of call this a jackknife. You're gonna bring both of your legs up and you're gonna extend one leg down. And if you have sort of a hip pop sensation, or if you can feel a popping noise in your hip, that again is likely a sign that you have a tight iliacus. So if any of these are something that kind of had the light bulb go off for you that, hey, I noticed this on myself, then the hip hook is certainly something to consider looking into, at least purchasing, to potentially relieve some of that tension in your psoas and your iliacus to maybe fix some of these imbalances in your body. So once you've determined that you do indeed have a tight iliacus and you've gone ahead and gotten the hip hook, then there's really 3 different methods that you can go about actually using this to sort of relieve some of that tightness. But before you do that, and before I walk through those 3 different methods, it's important to make sure that you actually are targeting the right part of your body. So I'm just gonna show quickly a few different tips that they have for making sure that you are actually targeting your psoas and your iliacus with this tool. So once you're ready to get started, the first thing to do is to go ahead and locate your psoas. And there's a few different tips that you can follow in order to make sure that you're starting in the correct spot with your hip hook. And the first is just to go ahead and put your hands on your hips. And as you put your hands on your hips, you'll notice that the front of your fingers should be resting pretty close to sort of like a little bony point on your pelvis. This bony point is called your anterior superior iliac spine, or your ASIS for short. So if I roll up my shirt here, you'll see what I'm pointing to here. This is just sort of a bony point on the front of my pelvis. So that's where you're gonna wanna start. And then your psoas is just gonna be about an inch in from that. And so let me just show my belly button here as well for reference. So you're gonna wanna go about an inch in from that. So this is where your psoas is. So that's where you're gonna wanna make sure that you're initially putting the hook on your hip hook. Now there's one other tip that they offer as well, which is to go from your nipples straight down. And so if you go right along that line, that should take you right about to that same point. Again, you're gonna wanna still locate that ASIS, but you're gonna wanna be just right in here. And that's where, when you initially go to take your hip hook, you wanna target right into that spot. So when you're gonna initially lay down on it, that's where you wanna target initially to release that psoas. They call it nip to hip. So then once you've properly located your psoas, it is time to go ahead and get started using your hip hook. And hip hook has 3 different sort of methodologies that they suggest using when you initially try out this device. And once you get comfortable, then going ahead and selecting the method that you feel works best for you. And the 3 different methods, and these are sort of from least aggressive to most aggressive, but the first is sort of a doorway method. The second is a roll onto method. And then the third is a lay on method. And so I'll just show each of those and just talk about a little bit each of them and how I feel and how to actually go about each of them throughout that process. So the first method is gonna be the doorway method. This is gonna be a great option for anybody that's just a little nervous about how much pressure they're gonna get putting their full body weight into this tool. It's also a great option for someone that might have a little bit more tissue and you're just a little bit uncertain about putting all of your body weight on this. So what you're gonna do is just very simple. Again, you wanna find your psoas first. So you go nip to hip, find that point, go ahead and put the hook right on that point. Then next you're gonna take the base of the hip hook and you're gonna put it against the door frame. And again, this is gonna be pointing out, so you want this to always point away from your body, this handle portion. Once you've got it there and you feel like it's in the right spot, you can just go ahead and lean into it and you can apply as much pressure as you want, but this should be uncomfortable for you, especially if this is your first time. It's not gonna be a pleasant feeling. It's gonna feel like maybe it's getting hot, you're getting a little burning sensation. That is the, the scar tissue and just different tightness in the fascia being released. So that is a good feeling, that's normal. But again, you can go as aggressive or as gentle as you like with this Doorframe method. Once you've sat there for about 30 to 60 seconds and you feel like your psoas has released, that's where you can then go ahead and actually put some pressure on the hook and hook it into your iliacus here and start to get some of that relief. And you're gonna get a different sensation, but as you release that, you're gonna get a release of your iliacus as well as your psoas. And you're gonna wanna do this for about 30, 60, 90 seconds again. And then once you've done that, you can just release it. You should feel just some release of tension there, and you'll feel, a lot more comfortable than at previous. And you can go ahead and try that a couple times. You can do this a couple times a day even if you feel like you're getting a lot of benefit of it, but it should not be leaving you super sore. Again, it is gonna be uncomfortable while you're using it, but as you get more comfortable with this, then you can transition to some of the other methods, which is gonna be the roll-on and the lay-on method. Now the next method is called the roll-on method. You wanna make sure you're doing this on a flat surface. I'm gonna do it on my square 36 exercise mat, and it really is just what it sounds. You're gonna essentially roll onto the hip hook. So the first thing you're gonna do, just as the other one, is you're gonna go nip to hip to find your psoas. So once you find that spot, you're just gonna take the hook of your hip hook, place it on that psoas, and then slowly roll onto the device. Once you're rolled onto it, you're just gonna wanna relax for about 30 seconds. You're gonna feel some tightness. It's gonna maybe feel like your skin is tearing. You're gonna maybe feel some heat, but that is all the tension being released from your psoas. So just lay there, relax for 30 seconds. And as you lay there, you'll feel your psoas actually start to ease up and your body start to release some of the tension that it's hanging on to with that, and just relax. And then once you feel like it's actually relaxed a little bit, then you can take your arm and drop it down onto the hip hook itself. And this is gonna then target your iliacus and hook in to your pelvis there. And then again, you'll just relax for another 30 seconds. Now when you lay your arm down on it, you can either just lay your arm on it like this, or if you'd prefer, you can actually grab it and just kind of lean into it a little bit more aggressively. Either is fine, it's just a personal preference. I tend to find myself doing this a little bit more. If you watch a lot of the hip hook videos, they seem to encourage this movement, but both of them are gonna do the same thing. It's just a personal preference. And once you've kind of laid there for 60 to 90 seconds, you can just release off of it and then feel some of that relief. And then really the last method is just the lay-on method. It's probably the most aggressive and the one that you're not gonna really wanna do until you actually are real comfortable using it. But you're essentially just gonna leave the hip hook flat on the surface. And again, with all of these, you wanna make sure that the actual handle part of the hip hook is going out of your hips. You can actually push onto that part. So this should never be going in towards your belly button. It should always be going away from your body. But you're just gonna go ahead and lay it flat. And then, as you get comfortable and just know where you need to lay on it, just go ahead and lay right on it right away. And again, you're just gonna relax here for 30, 40, 50 seconds, however long it takes until you feel like your psoas has actually been released. And then once that's been released, then just go ahead and again, either lay your arm on to the hip hook or take your hand and hook into the iliacus and relieve some of that. Now, once you do that, you're again gonna wanna lay there for 30, 60, 90 seconds, however long it feels like, until it actually releases. And then once you feel some of that relief, just go ahead and ease off of it and go ahead and feel some of the tension go away. So that is just a quick look at the hip hook overall, really impressed with this device. Obviously, it's a very simple tool, but it is one that has the potential to do a lot of great things, especially if you're someone that does have a tight iliacus that's maybe resulting in some of those pains in your hips, in your back, in your knees. This could be something to take a look at. The price of this is $200, which does seem like a pretty high price tag given how simple it is, but when you look at the cost savings that you'll have about not having to go visit a physical therapist or a massage therapist, I think it's worth it, and I don't think you can put a price tag on the relief that this provides if you do have some serious issues that are being caused by your iliacus. I definitely think the $200 is a great investment, and you'll have a lifetime of use out of this as well. So if you are interested in purchasing one, I will put a link in the description for you to do so. I don't really have anything negative to say about this other than it does have a little bit of a learning curve, specifically in figuring out exactly where you should be putting it on your psoas, but once you have that figured out, it really is simple to use and it feels great. It provided a lot of relief to me specifically in just loosening up some of the tension that I had in my core and in my hips. So this is definitely something that I'm gonna continue to use just as sort of part of my overall maintenance routine, and using this, you know, every couple weeks or so just to free up some of that tension. But if you guys do have specific questions about this hip hook, go ahead, drop it in the comments down below. I'll do my best to answer that. Otherwise, if you did like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to this channel. It helps me keep making videos like this and having cool new products like the hip hook to review. But otherwise, that is the hip hook. That's a review. Enjoy your recovery.